Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this final forum of the 2024 primary season. I'm Peter Shapiro, speaking on behalf of the Election Forums Committee of the Residents' Council here at Horizon House. It is Monday, July 15. Voting will begin in a few days. We will hear during this forum from candidates for two state offices: Insurance Commissioner, Superintendent of Public Instruction. It is my pleasure now to introduce our moderator for this forum, Bill Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you to all the candidates for appearing at this event. It is very important to residents of Horizon House to know who the candidates are, what their positions are, and to hear their responses to questions that especially concern us. And this forum, as awkward and strange as it may seem with this technology, is the best way we can manage to do that. So we appreciate your patience and your willingness to participate in this event. As I've explained to the participants here, the format's fairly simple. For the first office, which we'll consider, which is the Office of Insurance Commissioner, we have 5 candidates. Each will have a 2-minute opening statement. And then after that, they will respond to a series of questions in 1-minute bursts. And we will do as many of those questions as we have time for. The questions are written by Horizon House residents. And the candidates will not have seen the questions before tonight. After those questions are finished, each of the candidates then will have another 2 minutes for a closing statement. At that point, we'll move on to the second office, which is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and we'll go through basically the same pattern with those 3 candidates. So I think we can, with that introduction, can just get started now. The first, as I said, the first set of candidates are for the Office of the Insurance Commissioner. The Insurance Commissioner office in the state of Washington is a smaller state agency, less than 300 employees. They have a number of volunteers that help, and their job is to protect consumers and to make sure that the companies and agents and brokers follow the rules. That's basically what they do, and it is that job that they're all anxious to take on. The 5 candidates we have, if they're all here now, I'm not certain they're all here now, but the 5 I thought we had, and I will list them in alphabetical order: Phil Fortunato, Jonathan Hendricks, Patty Kuderer, Justin Murda, and Tim Verzal. I think they're all here now, Peter. Do I understand that correctly? Well, I don't hear Peter, so we'll just assume they're here. So we can take those people in alphabetical order and for their opening statements, 2-minute opening statements. And when we get to their closing statements, I'll reverse the alphabetical order so they don't have to all be in the same place. So we should start then with the alphabetical order. Phil Fortunato, could we have a 2-minute opening statement from you, Phil? Now, Peter, I'm not hearing anything. Is
Bill, you're on mute.
See, Senator Cooter gave me a T-shirt that said "You're on mute," and I forgot to wear it. So, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. So, Senator Cooter and I work together on the Housing Committee. So, hopefully, we'll maintain our friendship afterwards. But one of the things that the Insurance Commissioner does is implement rules. So, this is one of the agencies where a large portion of what the agency does is determined not by legislation, but by rules. So that means that an insurance, whoever you elect as insurance commissioner, can actually go in there on the first day and say, you know what, we're not going to do any of this stuff. We're going to do something totally different. Publish those rules, and 30 days later, that's what it is. So I'm not a big one for regulation. Now, we need responsible regulation. I use the example in my business now, which is Clean Water Act compliance. Reasonable regulation is not very costly, but gives you a big, huge benefit. But then when you start imposing additional regulation on top of that, you get more and more regulation, more and more cost, and pretty soon you're in an unreasonable cost situation, but you're not getting very much more benefit for that to the consumer. So the object is everybody is complaining about the cost of insurance. Well, an insurance company is a business like any other business, and things that government does affect the cost to the consumer. And my big goal is to minimize that cost. And by doing so, I want to increase the number of insurance agents or insurance companies competing for consumers' business in Washington State. And so with that, more competition, less reasonable regulation, more competition, and we should wind up with lower costs.
Okay, thank you, Phil. And now we'll move on to Jonathan Hendricks for a 2-minute statement.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everybody at Horizon House. Appreciate the opportunity. I'd like your vote to be our next Washington State Insurance Commissioner, who's responsible for approving the rates that insurance companies can charge in Washington and other pivotal market activities, as Phil articulated. Healthy stakeholders in our market are pivotal. Currently, the insurance market drives over $58 billion of revenue just in Washington. And so it's pivotal, but sometimes their special interests are at odds with the people using their services. So my campaign is focused around affordability, access, and customer experience to create a healthier insurance market for people, communities, and businesses who buy, maintain, and use insurance. I'll use the last 2 minutes to fill you in on my family and my other qualifications, but I approach this through a business lens, having more than 35 years experience in insurance in various executive capacities. I have an end-to-end understanding of the entire insurance system, as well as some of the root drivers of risks and costs. And really, legislation and prudent policy go hand in hand with healthy communities and businesses, which really enrich all Washingtonians. As Phil articulated, I think I would agree with the desire to enable folks just to get back to making ends meet here. And with that, I'll give up the rest of my time to the next candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's very helpful. Then we move on to Patty Critter.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I'm Senator Patty Cooter, running to be your next insurance commissioner. A little bit about me. I'm a mom, a legislator, and an attorney. I started out as a prosecutor and a city attorney and worked as an employment lawyer for decades. Over my career, I've handled hundreds of insurance claims for consumers. I've been a legislator since 2015, and as a legislator and as a litigator, I have a proven track record of standing up to powerful interests. This last session, I had 4 insurance-related consumer protection bills passed with either unanimous or strong bipartisan support, including a major pharmacy benefit manager bill that will bring down drug costs. I also took on the healthcare plans in the hospital system, improving access to the latest medical technology for mammograms and ensuring emergency medical treatment for ectopic pregnancies and miscarriages is provided at all hospitals. So my vision for the office, well, the job, as you said, is to regulate and provide oversight of the insurance industry, to approve rate increases, monitor all insurance-related businesses, and ensure our laws are fully and fairly implemented. And it's the office that is responsible for addressing the insurance impacts resulting from climate change. Importantly, the commissioner acts in the public interest, and that means the office must be consumer-centered. It's healthcare that motivates me to seek this job. I know firsthand what it's like to have a healthcare company deny life-saving care to my infant daughter, and that experience has never left me and shapes my views on healthcare to this day. My priorities will be to be a fair arbiter of the insurance industry while increasing transparency and fairness for consumers, working to reduce the cost of healthcare and helping to make healthcare more accessible, working to reduce the cost of premiums for homeowners and auto insurance, and to rebuild the office and ensure a respectful working environment. We can have a strong consumer advocate as commissioner and a healthy insurance market. The two are not mutually exclusive. I hope to earn your vote, and I look forward to the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cooter. And we move on now to Justin Murda. Do we have a Justin Murda in the crowd? Risa, has he signed in yet?
No, he is not, Bill.
Okay, so we'll just have to put him out. Mr. Verzal, you would be next for a 2-minute opening statement.
All right, my name's Tim Frizzell. I've owned a body shop for over 30 years. I've dealt with insurance companies and I've seen where the rates have skyrocketed and they keep giving less and less to the consumer. I feel we need to get these rates down, get it affordable so everybody can get insurance. It is the law. You're supposed to have auto insurance, but with the rates skyrocketing, the insurances are getting out of hand, and we're going to have more and more people on the street without insurance. So my job is going to be to lower the rates in auto, your home, and your medical. So with that, I will let you move this on to the questions.
Okay, thank you, Verzal. Is that the way we pronounce it? Thank you.
Yep,
All right, now we move
for me. I've been called worse.
Well, we try and make it nice. Move on now to questions. And the limit here is one, you'll each get the same question. And the limit is a 1-minute statement about the question. And to begin with, we'll start with, and I'm going to use the alphabetical order for this question list, and then we'll mix those up a little as we go down the questions. But we'll start with Mr. Fortunato again. And this is about the complications of Medicare and Medicare and Medicaid various plans. And the question is this: how can the insurance commissioner assist individuals in sorting through all the complexities and options when choosing Medicare supplement and Medicare Advantage plans? So how can the insurance commissioner help individuals sort through that is the name of the question. Mr. Fortunato.
So, the insurance commissioner's office could set up a particular person that would deal with these kind of things. So but I want to focus on some of the things that's really affecting Medicare and Medicaid, and that's reimbursement levels. So the insurance commissioner really has to be an advocate for reimbursement levels, keep those levels substantially higher than they are now, because people are going to go in for service for, go into the doctor, and you're getting doctors saying, I'm not taking any more Medicare patients, because they're limiting that because of that reimbursement level. So by being an advocate to increase those reimbursement levels, that's going to open up more services for people that are on Medicare. So helping them to get that in transition, that's something that you can do in the office, but advocating for a higher Medicare reimbursement is essential to provide those services.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fortunato. Now, Mr. Hendricks, would you like to take a swing at that question?
I would. Thanks again, Bill, and thanks for the question. So Medicare is highly regulated, and especially this year going into 2025. So the degree to which the insurance commissioner will be able to influence, the federal oversight of that will be limited through the Insurance Commissioners Association nationally, which I would participate in. We can also influence how the Medicare and Medicaid intersect in that dual coverage situation. So besides the regular services that Phil touched on for consumers that the insurance commissioner would maintain, we can go a step beyond and develop feedback that would be provided to the federal government on how they handle the distribution. And of course, we would maintain oversight of the agents and brokers distributing the Medicare and Medicare supplement policies in Washington State, with special attention to the med sup stuff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Senator Cooter, would you take a swing at that question?
Of course, it's a very important question, and I would tell you that the Insurance Commissioner's Office has the SHIBA program, which is a program of volunteers. It's a network of volunteers across the state that helps consumers with their Medicare choices right now. It was created decades ago. It's the first in the country, and others have followed suit behind Washington. I consider it an incredible, important resource and asset for consumers of this state, and I intend to expand it and to make sure that consumers know about it, because clearly some on the call don't know we have that already, but that can be a huge benefit to consumers, and as they wade through the maze of the Advantage Plus plans, et cetera, et cetera. We have the most complicated healthcare system in the world. It's also the most costly and the most challenging to use, and we don't have the best outcomes. It's something that I will be laser focused on in terms of helping improve that and improve access for everyone.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Mr. Rizal, what can you tell us about your view about what the commissioner could do about helping people in the state with Medicare and Advantage plans and supplement plans?
Well, that also needs to be lowered down. The insurance rates on your medical has gotten out of hand. When you have the PBMs monitoring how much they're going to pay or sell the medication for, and that's driving the cost up. Like I said, the insurances in that have got to be cut. Not cut to where we need people to be able to afford this stuff. So with that, I think the PBMs need to start being monitored a little bit more and get the drug prices down so everybody can afford them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That brings us then to question number 2, and we'll start with Mr. Hendricks this time. And this is a similar question, but it's a little different cut. The question is, should the insurance commissioner grade the various plans offered by insurance companies to include listings of complaints against particular companies? Mr. Hendricks?
Well, that's great. And we didn't plan this in advance, right? So customer experience is really one of my 3 key themes. And so to answer your question, I would be an advocate of this and work to affect a policy where everybody could agree on what constitutes treating customers like customers and respect and dignity, and create metrics by which we can measure that and report that to the consuming public. And, they say a rising tide floats all boats, and I believe that would achieve the same object. A similar system exists called the STAR system for Medicare, more to the effect on health systems, and health plans, but it still has the desired effect. Thank you for the question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Senator Cooter. What do you think about that?
I'm sorry. Say that again, please.
What do you think about that question that we were talking about?
Well,
grading
I think
the various plans.
Transparency is critical, I think, and it's valuable information that consumers could have. If you see that one company has 500 complaints and another company that you're shopping around with too has 0 complaints, that might motivate you to go with company B that didn't have any complaints. Right now, they actually do post some of these complaints on the insurance commissioner's website. They're going through a revamping right now as well. So there may even be more information on there, but it's public record. And so I do think it's important for consumers to have that information when they're making choices about where they want to put their premium dollars and find insurance coverage.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brizal, what do you think about ranking companies that way?
Well, they need to open it up. They're saying our medical is wide open, and it's not. You go in and you're months out on getting any type of somebody to see you. They're saying it's all bottleneck, and they need to open up these doctors' offices to where they're not out there 6 months on a highly emergency type visit. So the the health department or the health plans and stuff have gotten out to where they're making way too much money, and we need to get the cost lowered, and we need to get everybody back in line and streamline this stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Rizal. And lastly, Mr. Fortunato.
Well, thank you again for this, but this kind of all hovers around increasing competition. Increasing competition will allow companies to basically tell people why, hey, you should come to me because we don't have any complaints. You know, look at us. We're the most customer-oriented company. And so we can instill the private sector into doing this to get that communication out there, that how are they performing? And you know, one of the things the insurance commissioner does is do the rate plans. And there's a program called File and Use. This means instead of waiting for the insurance commissioner to approve something, they come out with a rate and they just implement it. However, if the insurance commissioner then goes back and reviews it and it's out of whack, that company has to issue refunds, which is what happened in Florida. So they're in an incentive to have a reasonable rate increase while it's being reviewed. But more competition would help do that.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Moving on now to the third question. This has to do with agents. And the question is this, and we'll start with Senator Cooter on this one. The question is, what role should the insurance commissioner have in assuring effective regulation of insurance agents? Senator?
Well, it's the role that's currently being played now is to monitor the registration, et cetera. And I just met with a group of independent insurance agents this morning, and I can tell you that they view their role as being consumer education on the different policies. I see the insurance commissioner being a partner in that, in the sense that I think that there needs to be more consumer education about insurance products, and the assistance that the insurance commissioner's office can bring to consumers when they have a complaint. I do think that you know, we have thousands of agents in the state, and for the most part, they do a really excellent job. But there are some that step out of line, and when they do, it's the insurance commissioner's job to hold them accountable. And that's why we have a legal affairs department and an investigations unit. And you can better believe that I will be making sure that they're held accountable when they need to be.
All right, thank you. Mr. Verzal, what do you think about regulation of insurance agents?
Well, there is a deal that some of these agents are not explaining the insurance policies to their clients right, and they should be held accountable. Some of these agents are underinsuring people on their homes just to get them to move from one insurance company to another insurance company. And then when a catastrophic incident happens, like their house burns down, then they do not have the funds to rebuild because the agent that they went to underinsured them to get them to come from the other insurance company. And that agent should be held accountable and he should be fined. So I do feel the insurance commissioner should be on top of some of these agents.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Verzal. Mr. Fortunato.
So what, you know, once again, this is something that the insurance commissioner's office currently does, is oversee the agents and making sure that agents are following the rules and regulations that are currently in place. The question comes in is, do we need additional rules or additional regulations on top of that? And I don't particularly believe so. I mean, we'll have to review the regulations that are currently in place, but we want insurance agents that are going to be honest, truthful, and represent their companies, the policies that they are selling well. And but we need to have an educated consumer base also on this. When we're turning around and saying, the first thing I'm saying, if my house burns down, do I have the money to recover it? And I'm the one that should be able to make those decisions. We had a fire one time on a business piece of property. And the insurance company tried to say that the barn that we were using as a storage facility was an outbuilding, and outbuildings weren't covered under the insurance policy, as opposed to a storage facility. So We got in a big fight with the agent over that, and eventually we got it resolved. But those are the things that you have to watch out for.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Hendricks.
Yes, thanks. This would, does fall under the oversight portion and the market conduct oversight that the existing office performs. I think there's room for the, participation of agents and brokers in improving the existing transparency that purchasers so really don't get. And so I think we need to leverage them a little more than we've been in the past. There is an ethics component of the licensing for an insurance agent. So we would look to that to strengthen that. But I think transparency may be in the future if costs continue to go up. So we would look to leverage that to affect greater affordability of purchasing in Washington.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. It's a tough one. This is, and we'll start with Mr. Verzal on this one. What can the insurance commissioner do to help reduce drug costs, including the regulation of pharmacy benefit managers? Mr. Verzal?
Well, that's where you need, some of these insurance companies own these pharmacies. They own the CVS, Caremark, Optimum RX is owned by United Health, and the PBMs are in charge of what the insurance company can sell you as a drug, and they tell you what they can charge. And you need to get this PBM out of there because they're in the middle making a ton of money, and they're not really participating in any of the medical health other than taking everything from the consumer's pockets. So they own 80% of these big pharmacies. The PBMs own 80% of these Optimum pharmacies, and that's what needs to be taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fortunato.
Yeah, thank you for this. Years ago, we had one of my constituents had a problem with their with their prescription drug, that the cost of the prescription drug was outrageous for what their income was. But they were unaware of a program that the drug companies have that will actually get them free or very reduced cost drugs. So we were able to get that person her prescription drug medication, which was costing her something like $200 or $300 a month, down to simply covering the postage. So a lot of people aren't aware that drug companies offer some of those services for people that can't afford it. But again, you have it all comes down to more competition in the marketplace. That's what drives the American economy and getting costs down.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hendricks.
Thanks. This is an interesting question and a tough one and good question. So Gold Star Award, there's PBMs and then there's access. So access to drugs can be through either. As you know, Walgreens recently announced store closures in Washington last year. I think Rite Aid closed over 60 locations in Washington. There's also the fight that independent pharmacies have for survival. So my administration would take a hard look at the existing legislation that Senator Cruder and colleagues put together. Despite its flaws, I think it's a start in the right direction. But I think we need more focus on it. In addition, the consumer division of the insurance commissioner would put this front and center in our efforts to make healthcare more affordable, accessible, and also add a better customer experience from PBMs.
Okay, thank you. Senator Cruder.
Well, we did pass my pharmacy benefit manager bill this last session, which puts guardrails around PBMs. And to describe what a PBM operates like, it's like the Enron of the drug pricing chain. Okay, it takes the spread. It takes a cutoff every step of the way, and they have become vertically integrated and horizontally integrated. And 3 of them control 88% of the drug pricing chain. That's a lot of profit that they're making, and they control who's in network. The drugs that are in that network, they control the formularies. We put guardrails around that, and the insurance commissioner's job is going to be to make sure that that law is fully and fairly implemented. And it was worked on over 7 years with dozens and dozens and dozens of stakeholders to arrive at the legislation that we were able to get passed with strong bipartisan support in both chambers. And it will be a central piece of the healthcare reform that I work on as insurance commissioner.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Senator. Now, I think we are going to start back into the closing statements here. And as I promised, we are going to reverse the order we had the opening statements in. So we'll start with Mr. Verzal, a 2-minute closing statement, Mr. Verzal.
All right, so I retired in 23 of October, and I did not ever think I would be trying to do this. I have dealt with the insurance companies on the auto side, and I've gotten fed up, and I've heard about everybody on the medical stuff. And the more and more I'm out there pounding signs, the more and more I get frustrated with what has not been done. I am not a Coropolitan. I am doing that in my own pocket. I'm not having fundraisers so I can blow a bunch of people's money. It's out of my own pocket. You give me your vote and I'll work hard for you. That's basically what I'm here for. I was hoping to retire and enjoy life, but here I am going to look out for the people. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Cooter.
Thank you, and thank you all for your time tonight. I've spent my legal and legislative career upholding the principles of fairness, justice, and integrity. And it's these principles that I will take with me into the role of insurance commissioner. My track record as a state legislator demonstrates a commitment to fair and balanced decision-making. I have consistently worked across the aisle, crafting legislation that benefits all Washingtonians, not just a select few, and my dedication to consumer protection is unwavering. And it's for these reasons that I believe I'm the best qualified candidate for this position. I have the support of a vast majority of my Democratic colleagues in the Senate and the House, of mayors and council members, and of every statewide elected office holder. I also have the support of the medical community, from social workers to nurses, to doctors, to dentists, to pharmacists, and more. And I've been endorsed by Labor and Planned Parenthood, Alliance for Gun Responsibility, retired public employees, National Women's Political Caucus, and much more. I have their endorsements because I understand the real world impacts of policy decisions on individuals and families. And I am driven by a deep commitment to serve the public. And you can learn more about me at pattycooter.com. And I respectfully ask for your vote. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Hendricks.
With this general election, you have a pretty clear choice. You can elect a career politician backed by special interests, leading to higher insurance costs, fewer coverage options, and inconsistent service. Or you can elect an experienced leader with business experience who looks at things through a business, not a political lens, but who can work effectively as an independent, moderate voice for the people, communities, and businesses that buy, maintain, and use insurance. I have more than 35 years experience in the insurance system in various executive capacities. I've worked at insurance and nonprofit boards, including continuing care community boards, as a matter of fact, Kendall at Overland. I have an undergraduate degree from Whitman and an MBA from Baldwin Wallace. And 2 of my 4 kids are working professionals. One's a Marine serving at Camp Pendleton, and a 4th enters college this fall. So I'd really be, I think, an effective, non-political, but very effective and committed advocate for the people, communities, and businesses who buy, maintain, and use insurance in Washington. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Fortunato.
Thank you. So a little bit about myself. You mentioned the Marine Corps. My first 3 sons joined the Marine Corps. My 4th son didn't want to join the military, so I suggested the Air Force. That usually is the tagline. So, but my grandson has a unique rare disease where his brain does not tell him to breathe. And every single day, my daughter is arguing with insurance companies for life-saving services that need to be provided for him every day. It's going on. He was supposed to be dead at 3 years old. He's 6 years old. He's in the 95th percentile. And that's a commitment to my daughter fighting with the insurance companies and Medicare and Medicaid to get the services that she needs. Now, rare diseases and things like that, there is no medical expert. There's nobody that you could turn to and say, what do we do for this? He's one of 1,200 people in the entire world that have this syndrome. There is no expert. And it falls on parents, and in this case, my daughter, to fight for what she needs. And my commitment is your doctor and you should be making the decisions on what you're going to do, not some insurance company telling that you're not going to get the services that you want because it doesn't fall when you've got to go through all these hoops in order to get it. So my commitment to you is you elect Phil Fortunato, you'll have more competition, lower costs, and I'll fight for you to get the services that you need. And you're making the decision instead of your and your doctor instead of the insurance companies. That's my commitment. And I'd like to ask for your vote.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to thank all four of you for Mr. Versal, Senator Kruger, Mr. Hendricks, and Mr. Fortunato for taking the time tonight to fill us in on your thoughts about that and answer some of our questions. We really do appreciate it. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the other office we're going to talk about, which is the Superintendent of Public Instruction. And this is a primary agency charged with overseeing public K through 12 education in the state. It works with 285 school districts, and the superintendent allocates funds, provides resources and technical assistance in support of public education in the state. So we have three candidates, Dave Olson, Chris Reichdahl, and Reed Saras, and we will have a 2-minute opening statement from each of those, and we'll start in alphabetical order as before with Mr. Olson. Mr. Olson, a 2-minute explanation of why you're the best candidate for this and what you would do in the office.
Thank you. My name's David Olson. I'm running for Superintendent of Public Instruction, primarily to restore public trust in our public education system. Navy veteran. I served 28 years in the military. I went in the military right out of high school. I would consider myself to be an average student. I didn't really have the grades at the time to go into a 4-year university. So like my brother, father, and grandfather, I went into the military. Electrician, eventually becoming an underwater welder and a Navy diver. I was blessed to be able to spend 28 years, live all over the world. My wife's a school teacher. My youngest son's a school teacher. So is my sister, sister-in-law, and stepmother. So I've had a pretty good background. The school board in Gig Harbor. I'm in my 11th year on the school board. I've served as president and vice president. I'm currently the vice president. I've been on the board during the McCleary decision, which many people consider the levy swap. I was the president of the board during COVID, which is a very challenging time. And my school boards also have to deal with all the financial issues that are impacting school districts across the state. So I definitely have trial by fire in public education. I also served as a Pierce County Charter Review Commissioner back in 2015. So I have experience also reviewing county policy. I've also, as a military member and officer, have led large organizations the size of OSPI before. So I'm not going to be intimidated by the size of the organization. Across the state, 60,000 students over the past couple of years have fled public education, mostly because parents have given up. And I'm running to restore public trust. 10 years ago, we were in the top 10 in the country. Now we're in the bottom half. And I think that's just unacceptable. And that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. And now, Chris Reichdahl, who is the incumbent. Mr. Reichdahl?
Great. Thank you. I'm Chris Rakedale, Superintendent of Public Schools for the state of Washington. Thanks for having us. This is my third time with you all. 8 years ago, I was there in person in the library. It's a beautiful facility. I'm sorry we can't be there. Last time it was COVID, so it was very complicated. I'm the youngest of 8. I grew up on public assistance, food stamps mostly, and a lot of rental assistance because my parents were alcoholics and they lost their first 6 kids to the foster care system. They rebuilt that family. We had a lot of love, but a lot of financial distress. And so school's where I shine. It was my place to break the cycle of poverty. I was the first in my family to go to college, and I wanted to be a teacher and be a part of public ed. So I've been a classroom teacher, a school board member. I served on Education Foundation, a scholarship founder. I served 3 terms in the legislature, 14 years in the community and technical college system to see what it was in higher ed to receive students in public K-12. And then I've been in this role. Despite some of the rhetoric out there, we are a top 15 state. In fact, when you take a look at math scores in the country on the only common assessment by 8th grade, there are only 7 states that outperform Washington, statistically speaking. There are only 2 states in the country that outperform Washington, statistically outperform us in English language arts, mostly reading by 8th grade. So we've done all that, though, despite the fact that we've lost $1,000 per kid to inflation in the last 4 years. So in my next 4 years, I'm going to build $1 billion budget request just to catch up to inflation and then continue to enhance our supports on things like student mental health and make sure kids get meals. We've got a pretty amazing system, record kindergarten numbers, record numbers of kids learning dual language, a record number of kids getting college credit while they're in high school, the highest graduation rate we've ever had, even as kids are taking more math and science than any time in history. And when they go to college, they're taking fewer remedial courses. So they're prepared like they've never been prepared before. We've opened up grad pathways to career and tech ed, and I'm so proud that under my administration, we brought back civics as a graduation requirement. There's a lot of work left to do, and I'm looking forward to it. So I appreciate y'all's support, and thanks for having us tonight.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Saras.
Thank you so much for having us and doing this forum. I'm a 4th generation Washington State public educator, been a teacher, a school administrator, launched a national nonprofit working with public schools all over the country, tens of thousands of educators, 1,000 school and district leaders. I'm a father of 4, or 3, you can see him in the background there, 4th generation educator, 3 kiddos. I think the reason, I was encouraged to run by parents, educators, administrators, state leaders, federal leaders, because despite what the Seattle Times calls cheerleading mediocrity from the incumbent, we are falling steadily behind so many other states. And to me, in the article they put out endorsing me to lead the state school system as the next superintendent of public instruction, they talked about what we see as really minimizing the problems and making excuses. We're down to 35% of our low-income kids who are able to read and do math on grade level. We fell out of the top set of states across the board on NAEP. We're down on US News from 16 to 32nd. And to me, there's no excuse for us to be 40th out of 50 states in college readiness. And my top priority is youth mental health, where we're also 40th according to Mental Health America. We had 15% of adolescents seriously consider suicide in the last year. And when I took on mental health as a problem and challenge around the state, everywhere I went, people said, thank you for bringing us together around evidence to set a strategy. I think that's what we need to do. We need to come together around the evidence, Surgeon General's advisory on youth mental health, evidence about what works for learning recovery, and support greater progress. We have some progress in increasing pay for educators, 60% increase in overall spending under the incumbent, but unfortunately we're at all-time high levels under this administration in terms of attrition, 20% turnover in the last year among educators. So some good progress in terms of investments and salaries, but in terms of the outcomes for kids, we're just way off of where we need to be. And so looking forward to leading change in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Saras. Now we will go to some questions written by Horizon House residents. And the first one, we'll start with Mr. Olson this time. And this deals with the inevitable and apparently permanent problem about inequity and achievement gaps. The question is, what could the superintendent do to address the inequality and achievement gaps in our public schools? Mr. Olson?
One of the things I want to do is work with the school districts to determine what is helping and also what is helping them from achieving academic success. Over the past 10 years, we've actually doubled the amount of state funding that's gone into our school districts. Yet, as Ms. steep decline in academic achievement, I think we need to find out, as superintendent, I want to talk with the superintendents across the state, find out what the root causes are of why they're not achieving academic success. I want the state legislature to fully fund special education, and also as OSPI, I want to fix the transportation funding model. Those two funding issues, special education and transportation, those two alone are really devastating our public school systems across the state, and putting undue burden on it. I want to remove burdensome policies and regulations that are being pressed down into the school classrooms that are causing the teachers to spend less time instructing their kids and more time having to do documentation and surveys that are taking them away from teaching their kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Richter.
Yeah, thank you. To keep the progress going, again, 84% graduation rate in 4 years, 86% for those students who need a little extra time, and we get near 87, 88% ultimately, over 92% when kids then access our community and technical colleges. So the fastest growing grad rates in the state are Native youth, students of color, and low-income students, and also students with disabilities. So the progress has been very, very effective, but it's because of investment. We made significant investments from 2016 to 2020. Those have now waned, and we've lost ground against inflation. So to maintain those targeted investments, and we do focus more money on low-income students and low-income communities, that's where it's at. That is the group of students who struggle the most. Means intensive supports, which we've built, and wraparound. If you're hungry, you're not going to learn well. If you feel unsafe, you're not going to learn well. If you come to school and you need additional mental health supports and don't get them, the studying's pretty tough. So building those comprehensive systems as we have is how we've gotten to record high levels of success. We have to keep it going, put the next $1 billion in, and make the commitment to the next generation of kids.
All right, thank you. Mr. Saras.
Yeah, I don't think we need to keep going in the direction we're going. Literally every single year of the last 8 years, the achievement gap has widened in Washington State, and we continue to hear things from the incumbent like things are going great. I heard him say the other day that things are more equitable than they have ever been. I've devoted my career to the achievement gap. I think it's a really, really important question. I think it comes from 3 real sources. There's the opportunity gap underneath it. If you give people opportunity, they will rise to the level of expectation and opportunity. Unfortunately, we're giving 16% less money to lower income students in the state of Washington. The states that do it right, I've worked with states across the country who've reformed their funding formulas. They invest 30% more in lower income students. So we are highly regressive when it comes to how we put in money. The other part comes from a curriculum gap. If you're not offering rigorous opportunities to kids from all backgrounds, you'll see a lot of those achievement gaps exacerbated. And then teacher experience. If you put the least experienced teachers with the kids in need of the most support, then you have some challenges there. So I'm obsessed with closing the opportunity gap and getting the achievement gap back on track, as I've done around the country.
All right, thank you, Mr. Saras. Now I'll take a question about declining enrollment. And the question is this, and we'll start with Mr. Rekdal. How would you address the problem of declining enrollment, which is leading some school districts to consider closures? We're having a lot of noise about that here in Seattle, as you know. So how would you address the problem of declining enrollment, Mr. Rekdal?
Well, we can address it in part by making sure that there are comprehensive supports. Families want to put their kids in places where they know they're going to get everything they need. And I think there's questions as we relied on federal money. Our legislature relied on $2.8 billion in federal money, despite being the most efficient state in the country in spending those dollars. Those are going to wane, and now we're sort of exposed to the fact that we need additional supports here. About half of all of the students who left, and it's about 3.5% to 4% statewide, keep in mind, are homeschool youth. So families have chosen to keep their kids in homeschool. And now we see them coming back. We see kids who go from 4th grade to 5th grade to 6th grade. Those cohorts are building. What we will not be able to address is the fact that we have declining birth rates. Our kindergarten cohorts are significantly smaller than our graduating classes right now. So part of this is investment, and part of this is making sure that our districts just know we are in a period, especially in our urban areas, of population decline, and they do have to manage their budgets really efficiently and really effectively. But with a 95% levy passage rate around the state, the people who are closest to schools, they like their schools. They believe in their schools. So the last thing I'd say is let's stop the culture war of attacking public ed and using misinformation to tell people their schools aren't effective.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Well, I would have to disagree with Superintendent Reichdahl. I honestly believe that the students are leaving because their parents don't have faith and trust in their schools. There's lack of rigor. There's no accountability in the classrooms for the students to do well. Superintendent Reichdahl talks about graduation rates, but there are schools in the state that don't give a grade below a C. So I've talked to parents who said their children submit a paper only with their name on it, and they still get a C. So they graduate with a C, but they can't pass their state assessment. So they leave high school, can't read, can't write, and can't their checkbook. So parents are pulling their students out of public education because the schools are not transparent. My school district, where I'm on the school board, we have our entire budget, every line item, and our full curriculum online for all the members and parents to see for full transparency and accountability. I think we need to start working on restoring parent trust in our schools. And until that happens, they're going to continue to pull them out for homeschool and private school. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to another question. This is a hot button issue, if you'll pardon.
Oh, hold on. Was I not working before there?
Did I miss you, Mr. Sars?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. No problem.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. I don't think the problem is the public school system or educators or parents or families. I think we need just new levels of state leadership on this. So we are halfway through a forecasted 10% enrollment decline in our public schools, which will, unaddressed, increase the financial strain that people are under. And so it's a per student formula, so that's going to continue to ratchet down in inequitable ways. I think we need a budget stabilization package to agree that we won't divest from K-12 on an inflation adjusted basis, focus those resources on the place in greatest need so that we can begin to close those gaps. And we just cannot be managing the resources that come in the way that we manage the COVID relief dollars. The OSPI under the incumbent reported that 3/4 of the money went to other and couldn't answer questions about which investments were most effective when the legislature said where we should put more money. So we need to build more confidence in how we use those resources effectively because local leaders are ready to do that work.
Thank you. And I apologize if I skipped over you. I have you listed to begin the next question. So while you're there, with your mic turned on, should schools limit or ban the use of cell phones and other social media devices in some or all of our public schools? Mr. Sars?
That's a great question. So I think we should have already begun serious implementation of the Surgeon General's guidance on social media and youth mental health. Came out almost a year and a half ago now, and we have not yet seen implementation at the school level. That suggests things like enforcing the existing age limits on social media, which are 13, considering raising those to 16. So I've talked with nonprofits like Common Sense Media, experts in other states who are doing this sort of work, and what would it mean for us to actually enforce the existing laws on social media age restrictions. Currently, it's unfettered access to things at all levels, and that's both at school and in the home. Then in terms of phones, I had my students, I was teaching at Rainier Beach this last year, check their phones at the door in a locker. They had individual keys so they could access them if needed. I would support any and every school who wants to do that sort of work with grants and technical assistance. It's too long in the coming because kids lose a grade level of learning when they have their cell phones on in their pockets.
Thank you. Mr. Reichdahl, cell phones.
Yeah, the legislature could do something very aggressive and then a local school district. So as Mr. Olson has done, he'll probably describe, each district is making this decision. What we're providing school districts is the research because it wasn't always clear the cost benefits of phones. We certainly know they're great learning devices in some ways, but the overall impact is real when there isn't a regulation in the classroom. So we were providing the research to school districts, and we're really giving them 3 things we see as best practices around the country and in the state. Number 1 is turn off phones when you come to school. Some districts allow kids between passing periods and lunch, and then others, they make them essentially turn them in as they come into the classroom. Those will go to school districts this year, but since OSPI can't force that, we'll bring the research, we'll bring those policy options and technical assistance. And then districts will take the next year to figure out how to have conversations in their own community for what works best for them. There's something bigger with phones, though, than just should it be on or off. And that's teaching kids all the misinformation, disinformation, and anxiety that comes about by the algorithms on phones. And I am changing the learning standards in this state as we speak to be the first state in the country to holistically approach media literacy in our learning standards. It's just as important as when that phone's on and off.
Thank you. Mr. Olson.
Well, thank you. I'm proud to say that about 2 years ago, our school board that I'm on decided to pass a policy to restrict cell phones and ban social media in our school district. We are one of the first in the state to do it. So I can say that I am already successful in making this change, and I would just scale it up. I'm a local control kind of guy, so I'd want to advocate school boards and school districts across the state to do similar policies. We are now in the state and on the West Coast. Los Angeles Public School District, Unified School District, just banned cell phones in their massive school district. So this is a wave that's taken on. Social media is absolutely destructive, especially for young middle school girls. For parents, we need to keep this out of the classroom. When we banned it in our schools, student discipline went down, academics have gone up, and students are now more engaged and actually talking to each other again, which is what we need to do to help lower anxiety and stress in our students. Seattle Times wrote a great article about the school district I'm on the board of, about the possibility of us banning cell phones and social media. And I would do the same and urge all school districts in the state to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. I'll have you up first in this next question. What policy would you follow to protect students and staff from violence initiating inside or outside the campus?
Well, one of the things, well, first off, I certainly don't advocate for violence in any form, especially hate speech or anything else. One of our school districts we did is we cleared a lot of the shrubs and all kinds and some things that take away vision so that people couldn't be doing anything behind the bushes or beating up someone or bullying someone. We added extra security cameras on all our campuses. We also hired armed security school safety officers, former police officers that do not wear uniforms. They patrol the halls, talk to the students, make their presence known to make sure that we can keep those discipline and those violence. We also have plenty of teachers out on the playground, and our school safety officers also parade, go around and walk around the school campuses at athletic events. They walk around athletic events. They say hi to everyone. They wear their security T-shirts to make sure everyone knows who they are. So I'm a strong advocate for reducing violence. And I think school resource officers and armed security officers on campus help to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rickdahl.
Is it me or
Mr.
Mr.
Rickdahl?
Saracen? Okay. So I was really proud to lead a charge here with a bunch of bipartisan support to get $300 million more invested in our schools. Districts could use that as they thought was appropriate to really address these larger issues. Some focused on mental health needs of kids, others put it into security officers and safety. That's one step here. We have a public health crisis, and it's guns. We've always had kids who have had conflict in school, and we teach them how to deal with that. We walk professionals how to do that. We're up against something we can't control right now. Unfettered access to guns. Students don't bring them to school very often, but they do at times. But they tell us through their own survey work that they could easily access them if they needed to or wanted to. And that's the tragedy here. So we've got to get our legislature to keep making sure that the supply of guns and the access to guns, mostly due to not securing them properly in the home, that we get rid of that biggest risk. We've redesigned buildings to have single access points as much as possible. We've done professional learning. We've built huge mental health networks with kids, and we have what's called threat assessment now. When there is a risk, there's a whole team that swarms in. We have one of the lowest incidences in the country in our schools, but we're still working really hard to get better.
Thank you. Mr. Saras.
I agree that we need to be controlling access to guns for kids in particular. And I had a classmate of mine who was shot and killed by his brother when I was in high school, and decades later, we're still grappling with this challenge. To me, we do have good leadership in this state and the legislature around this topic. We've been making progress. It's evidence-based, it's proven. We should continue that work that the legislature is doing on that front. In schools, we need to, I think, insist that all schools have clear, transparent, evidence-based plans for safety that they're sharing with the community. And then we absolutely need to work much harder on the mental health. We mentioned 40th in the nation for youth mental health earlier. We need to make sure all kids are feeling like they belong and connected in with the school culture. And then one of the big things that I would do on this issue and many others is that's not being utilized very well now is the bully pulpit to say, where are we seeing the greatest safety results? Where are we seeing the greatest progress in the state? What does the data tell us about what those folks are doing? And how can we share the good word with others around the state who can adopt similar practices and learn together about that?
All right, thank you. Now a question, and we'll start with Mr. Ekdahl this time. How should districts handle the many questions rising from transgender developments, including restrooms, inclusion in sports, etc.? Mr. Ekdahl?
Yeah, they should follow federal civil rights and state civil rights law, including our state's Human Rights Commission, which has really set some very good framework here. We need to obviously make sure parents are as involved as possible with the student's public record. That's what the new initiative does, and we're going to make clear that parents get access. But you also have to balance student privacy in that, and there are federal laws that protect kids' privacy, particularly when a student comes out or shares something that they believe would put them in a risk by telling a parent or a guardian. So there's a delicate balance that schools play here. Parents are the first and foremost teachers of their kids, and so we balance that very carefully. Students get to identify, like any person who's controlling their own body. Our job is to make sure that they're accommodated safely. The best practices out there in bathrooms, of course, are individually locked bathrooms, and it almost avoids the situation completely. So what we should do is follow Human Rights Commission in this state, follow federal civil rights in Title IX, and not violate the law just because we have a personal disagreement with that. But at the same time, when it's part of the student's official record, make sure parents get official public record.
Thank you. Mr. Sars?
I agree. It's critical to enforce the civil rights law, state law, and otherwise in support of students' rights with regard to these issues. I think we have got to make sure that all kids feel included and that they belong and that they're safe in our schools. This is an absolute top priority. And when we look at the data, trans students in particular are not having that experience in their public schools. 50% of trans adolescents in Washington state, according to their own responses on the Healthy Youth Survey, seriously considered suicide within the last year. So we have got to come out in support of kids of all backgrounds and experiences and identities and make it an inclusive environment in ways that we haven't yet accomplished. And we do that, I think, by absolutely enforcing and supporting the civil rights of kids.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I apologize, but could you please repeat the question? It was a little lengthy and
How should districts handle the many questions arising from transgender developments, including the use of restrooms, inclusion in sports, etc.?
Well, I will, as far as the law, I will agree with the other two gentlemen as far as following the law. We need to be respectful of all students. I think that the school districts need to work with parents as much as possible. I firmly believe that parents being actively involved with their children because they love them and they support them. You know, I personally had one of my children that had some issues when he was in school, and had he not come to me with his concerns and worked only with the school, I would have been pretty disappointed because I love and care about my children. And so I think that being transparent with the children and with the parents is very helpful. And I think that to be able to partner with the school districts, our school district allows trans students to use staff showers and staff bathrooms in order to have local control. But I think that most of the thing we need to just be respectful and follow the laws. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, now a question about special education, and we'll start with Mr. Sars. The question is, what can you do as superintendent to improve and expand funding for special education? Mr. Sars?
Sure, that's a great question. So we've had some drips and drabs of progress, you know, 1% more here and there in the cap for special education funding in recent years. I believe that it's the both ethical and legal thing to do to fully fund special education needs for kids. We're one of the few states that is really insisting on maintaining a cap, saying a district can only have a certain percentage of students with special education needs. I don't think that fits with the federal law and otherwise. So I think we have to address that. And I think that comes, as I mentioned earlier, by really supporting greater confidence in our ability to get those funds where they belong. We were one of 3 states cited for mismanaging the COVID relief dollars by the federal government. And so I think we need a plan to help address this and build the confidence with the legislature that we can get this work done. We also tried to increase wages for paraeducators, which are a huge part of special ed and much needed, but they're at incredibly high rates of turnover and below living wages in most cases in the state. So we need to really get that work done as well.
Thank you. Mr. Rekdal, special education.
Yeah, when I got here, we were woefully underfunding special ed at $1.1 billion a year for 120 plus thousand, almost 140,000 kids now. We've doubled that to $2.2 billion. We've implemented inclusionary practices. So students with disabilities are getting more time in general education settings, and we've seen their graduation rate move up 10 percentage points. So it's about investment. It's about supporting educators, not just those trained as special educators, but gen ed teachers who also have students with disabilities in their classrooms. Unlike Mr. Cyrus, who keeps pumping this lie, our state was never told that we mismanaged money. In fact, we were recognized for quickly responding when it turned out our school districts didn't post their budget plans fast enough, but no dollars were mismanaged. And that's why the legislature in a very bipartisan way continues to invest in our public schools. They've seen us make good progress on special ed, but it is about the legislature's appropriation and us building the professional capacity of all educators to support students with disabilities even better. And of course, our community supports have to be there as well. So it's never just about schools, but also comprehensive supports for families.
Thank you. Mr. Olson.
Well, as I said earlier, 2 of the largest issues facing our school districts across the state are the transportation issue and special ed. Seattle Public Schools has $115 million deficit, and $90 million of it is special ed funding. The state has definitely punted its obligation to local school districts on funding special ed. There's a $19 billion tax surplus in the state. They have more than enough money to fund special ed. We're allowing local school districts to use levy money to fund special ed, and that's a crime. They should not be doing it. Special education is a civil right. The state should be funding special education. They should be paying paraeducators. I agree with that, giving paras more opportunity to be in the classroom. We need to get special ed students off digital devices. They need to be working one-on-one with paraeducators, because putting on digital devices is doing nothing more than having a digital babysitter. It hurts the kids, and it's unfair, and I believe it's unconstitutional what we're doing for special ed students. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, we're coming to the last question now. We're going to run out of time here. This is a question that requires a prediction, but if the initiative, and I'm going to start with Mr. Olson, if the initiative to repeal the capital gains tax passes and state revenues decrease, in what areas would you reduce spending and or recommend cuts to the legislature? Mr. Olson?
That's that's a tricky question. Like I said, we have a $19 billion tax surplus right now. I don't think the capital gains tax is going to do anything for special education. 20 plus years ago, they had the state lottery come in. They said all the lottery money is going to go to education. Well, that didn't happen. They redirected it all to other projects. Then marijuana came in 15 years ago or 12 years ago, and they said all the revenue from marijuana sales was going to go to education, and that didn't happen either. Now they're saying capital gains tax or capital gains taxes is going to go to fund education. I disagree with that. I don't believe them. They don't have a track record of saying that's going to happen. So I don't believe that we're going to see any loss of income to the school districts just because they don't pass the cap and trade tax in November. So I just believe the state has enough money to fund education right now. I think that we need to find out where the money's going in these school districts and why there's no return on the investment on these school districts.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ekdahl. what would
Yeah, it's
happen-
an $800 million revenue source, and I want to strongly encourage people to vote no on 2109, the initiative to repeal capital gains. The first $500 million a year goes to early learning. It's funded an amazing early learning system in our state. We just saw the highest kindergarten readiness scores we've seen in 5 years in this state. So education will get hit. Everything above 500 million goes to school construction. So we will immediately see a loss of revenue to fund our schools, especially in rural communities. So you asked what the trade-offs are. I think it's a great question. The first thing I will do, as I did as a legislator, is freeze a bunch of tax breaks for companies that can absolutely afford to pay their share. Rather than cutting other programs, let's backfill the revenue with a more progressive source. That said, please keep the capital gains. Only 4,000 folks pay it. This is barely moving us off of 50th to 49th in the country when it comes to tax fairness and tax equity. So let's not talk about cutting things yet. Let's stand up for tax reform. Let's make sure we have the revenue, fully fund early learning, and fully fund our capital budgets with this. And let's cut some tax loopholes if we find we're short of revenue as a result of the initiative.
Thank you. Mr. Saras.
I agree. We absolutely need to maintain the capital gains tax. The stat that Chris mentioned, 50th to 49th is really important for people to know. We were the most regressive taxation state in the United States until this capital gains tax went through and bumped us up to 49th. So, second most regressive. And so we can do better than this. We should be pushing in the other direction to expand things like the capital gains tax and those sources of revenue. But, in fairness to the question, if we had to look at cuts, I would look at administrative side of things. Absolutely. And I think we need to keep the investments really focused on educators and where the kids are. So it's a tough situation. And I would encourage people as well to maintain the capital gains tax.
Thank you. Well, that ends the number of questions we have time for tonight. So we'll go back to closing statements. Each of you have a 2-minute closing statement. And as I promised, we'll reverse the order. We'll begin closing statements with Mr. Saras.
Great. Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. I've devoted my entire career to expanding educational opportunities. I think people can look at my record, and you should look at the records of people that you are voting for, because we say things, but all of us on here can say things, but what do you accomplish? And I have a track record of substantially expanding opportunity, improving achievement at the school, district, and state level all around the country. I'm grateful for a wide variety of support in this campaign, for the endorsement of the Seattle Times, to be in the lead in terms of fundraising. And I think everywhere I go, people are excited that we as Washington could do better. We have significant sources of revenue and strong economy. We have progressive values as a state. We have a commitment to facts and evidence. And so I love the work of translating that into results for kids, and really aspire to a state in which all of our kids are graduating ready for the future of their choosing, in which our reading and math levels are rising back to the top set where they used to be, not whether you want to debate it's technically behind or statistically tied with the state of Mississippi for reading and math. These are not where we should be as a state. And I think the crisis around youth mental health is challenging on the one hand to hear about and think about. 15% of adolescents seriously considering suicide. But on the other hand, it's an incredible opportunity to make a difference, because these are solvable challenges. And we see districts around the state solving these challenges. We see states around the country, 39 of them, solving these challenges in ways that we haven't figured out yet here in Washington. So I want to ensure we have universal access to mental health care for kids, work with paraeducators to ensure access to tutoring for kids who fall behind, and build one of the best systems in post-secondary readiness, and would humbly ask for your vote in this respect.
Thank you. Mr. Ekdahl.
Thank you. You live in a state that dedicates 3.1% of its GDP into public schools. The national average across the country of the 50 states is 3.6%. So we're 0.5% behind in our level of investment. That roughly translates to $3.5 billion a year that our state does not put into our public schools. Despite that, 8 years ago, over 20% of youth considered suicide. It's down to 15%. The national average is still 22%. We've made enormous progress in mental health investments. We've invested in capital budgets around the state. We've improved grad rates. College participation rates are on the rise, and students are taking fewer remedial courses. We know we produce a great student. But if you don't have the level of investment like a Massachusetts, you won't get the results. Despite that, again, there's only 7 states in the country that outperform us in mathematics statistically, but we can gain ground with the right investment. And only 2 states in the country that outperform us in reading. Mississippi, by the time they get to 8th grade, Mississippi has 36 states that outperform them. So there's no comparison here, and it's a bit of a dog whistle, quite frankly. I want folks to focus on the fact that when we invest in public ed and we're really committed to it, we get great results. Rather than use the misinformation to pound on public ed, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We got 24 states now offering vouchers to people. They're taking taxpayer money to for-profit corporations, failing online tutoring programs, even though that sounds sexy, there's no accountability to most of them. They're taking it to their churches in some states. They are destroying the system of public ed and the democratic principle of the sons and daughters of wealthy families and the sons and daughters of people who are on public assistance like I was with parents who only finished the 8th grade. We should be together in public school classrooms learning together. That's the gaps that we've been closing. That's how we've gotten to a record high grad rate. That's how we built the Washington state economy. It's on the backs of public educators. So let's go get our share of GDP. Let's invest properly, honor our educators, and push into what's hopeful and positive instead of constantly spending our time trying to tear down something only to look heroic after an election. Let's be honest about where we are. I appreciate you all. I'd love to have your support.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yes, thank you. Well, I like I said, I'm running for this position because as an 11-year school board member who's been reelected multiple times, I've continued to watch our public education system go in the wrong direction. As I said, we're in the top 10 in the nation when I came in as a school board member. Now we're in the bottom half. I would have to disagree with Superintendent Reichdahl on his comments. As an 11-year school board member, my school district is one of the better in the state. Seattle Times, when they did their endorsement interviews, called the school district is one of the better in the state. We have above 70% of our students read and write. We're above average, well above average in our math and science. But yet across the state, many students, less than half, can read and write. 30% can pass their math. That's just unacceptable. My school district is helped to reduce the mental health issues by eliminating cell phones and social media. I would want to scale that up statewide and encourage all school districts to take that on. As a former Navy diver, electrician, and underwater welder, our school district, is working on adding more and more blue-collar classrooms, skilled trade, CTE classes to prepare additional pathways for our students so they don't look just for a 4-year degree or feel that it's stigmatized to take on a skilled trade. We have millions of blue-collar jobs that are not filled in our state or the country, that need to be filled. And if we guide our students that it's okay to get a skilled trade in a blue collar job or go in the military as I did, I think that's really, really important. We are doing really well in our school district on standing up literacy task forces to identify students with disabilities, such as dyslexia and special ed issues. We identify them early so that we get much needed access as soon as possible. I'm really happy that we didn't close any schools. We didn't lay off any teachers. Seattle Public Schools is closing 20 elementary schools. Moses Lake laid off 100 teachers. Marysville went into Biden conditions and now has been taken over by their ESD. Our school district built 6 brand new schools in 4 years during COVID. We didn't lay off any teachers. I'm really proud of that, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Well, I will say it's been a busy evening, and the people at Horizon House really appreciate learning what your views are and hearing your responses to our questions about these very important offices. So thank you to Mr. Olson, Mr. Reichdahl, and Mr. Saros for being with us tonight. We really do appreciate it. Now I will turn the program over to our chairman, Mr. Shapiro. Peter?
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill, very much. And boy, what a great group of candidates we had in both of those races. A special thanks to you, Bill. for your great work as the moderator. So this ends our series of primary season forums. Ballots will be mailed 2 days from now, July 17, and voting continues through August 6th. We will return with forums for the general election beginning in September. We deeply appreciate all our candidates that we've heard from tonight for their willingness to undertake the arduous task of campaigning for office, and for bringing awareness of your values and policy ideas to voters throughout our state. Our nonpartisan Election Forums Committee supports you in this endeavor. Your calm and moderate voices are most welcome. So, in 2 days, or 3 or 4, whenever your ballots arrive, let's begin voting. My best wishes to everybody.